Okay, today I wanted to talk about The Equalizer, starring Denzel Washington. I've watched a whole bunch of clips from this movie before actually getting around to watching it. The YouTube clip auto-suggest farm got me good on this one. I went through most of the each movie. I think there's three of them out now, and I wanted to watch it and finally got around to it, and I got to where it kind of answered the question, because there's always a semblance of kind of a patient waiting with the movies, and then an explosive action, and then it goes down and then kind of dies down again like this. And it's kind of this very much, it's a different tune. So what I'll be comparing it to is kind of looking at John Wick and The Killer, kind of comparing that to The Equalizer, because what I wanted to highlight and kind of show you guys is Equalizer does an amazing job of building the story and building tension when very little is actually happening. And I want to show you guys how to do that. So the story starts off with a very, very normal person. He's working a very normal job at Home Mart in the movie. Obviously, this is a Home Depot Lowe's reference from there. And what we're introduced to is he's working a normal job. He's living in a normal apartment. He's very, we get he's lower class, or at least middle class, lower to middle class. He's not rich or anything like that. He's a fairly normal looking person. And so what we have then, it kind of cuts to him going about his job. He's kind of interacting with his coworkers. There's banter. He's kind of joking back and forth. And then he goes into the break room, meets the guy named Ralphie, who we can call the subject of subplot 1, if you want. And Ralphie is a overweight kid who's trying to apply to become a security guard. He wants to be the security guard, but he has to go below, I think in the movie it's 250 pounds. He has to get below there. So he's on a diet, and this is what McCall is helping him with, is the diet. So he has this interaction where he's eating a sandwich, and McCall basically inspects it, looking to see if the guy's breaking his dietary agreements. They have an agreement. And he ends it where Ralphie he's doing okay. It's tuna sandwich with veganese mayo and sprouts and that kind of stuff. So he's getting there, but he puts potato chips on it. McCall finds him, and he has this good nugget of wisdom, which is progress, not perfection, which I really like. I have perfectionist tendencies, so I have to keep myself in check from there. So it's progress, not perfection. So we're still working towards this diet. And then it cuts back to home. And from there, he's going about doing his normal home stuff. He cooks, makes food, eats, everything like that. He's lying in bed, but he can't sleep. He can't sleep at all. So then he goes to this diner. It's like the middle of the night, and he's going to a 24-hour diner. There's I think it's just him and one other person there. Other than there, he goes and sits down at a table, and he's at the diner, and he can't sleep. So he goes there, and he's drinking his tea and reading his book. He's reading Old Man and the Sea, which is a Hemingway short novella. I don't know what you call it. I think it's 100 pages or thereabouts. He's reading that book, and inside there, he starts talking, or this young girl who's age 20. You can tell by the way she's dressed, the time of date, and everything kind of acts that she's a woman of the night, as they say. And so they banter back and forth, and they kind of chit-chat, and they kind of talk. They're talking about the book, and they're talking about, reading, and he's kind of, again, coaching or talking to her, and he's like, I thought you were going to lay off sugar, because she's eating, apple pie. And so what you're doing with these two interactions, with this one with Ralphie, who, we'll call him subplot 1, and the woman of the night, or girl of the night, really, who is named Terry. And she is subplot 2 for now, at least. What you get is what we're doing is we're establishing the main character, Mr. McCall, as an authority character. We're establishing him as a strong character. Basically he's a protagonist, but he's a very strong one. He's an authority figure. He looks after people around him. He takes care of the people around him. You get this sense that he's constantly pushing and trying to get people to rise above their their lot in life, basically. And you can kind of see with this banter with Terry, especially because she's like, I thought you were going to do singing. And he's like, you can sing. And she's like, nah. And he's like, not in my world. And then change your world. He's constantly trying to encourage and push her to do better for her lot in life, because obviously they both know what she is. And so what you're doing is you kind of have this dual dialogue where they're talking about, on one aspect, they're talking about the book, and the second aspect, they're talking about her life and her decisions and stuff like that. Where he's kind of talking about, what you can do and what the main character can do in life and everything, and how it, happy and good. And you can see this kind of dual dialogue starts playing out from there. So we've got the book and then her life. But again, it's establishing him as a strong character, as an authority. And so what all of this is doing, all this buildup is doing for is basically it's selling us on the main character. He knows stuff. He's a strong character. He's good. He's a protector. He looks after the people around him. And so naturally what this means is we like him. And this is how we're going to make the audience like him. We're going to make him a protector, somebody who looks after the people who are downtrodden or the people who are on the lower rungs of society. Because again, Ralphie's not anyone important. He's a random overweight kid. He's not particularly super good looking. He's just a regular kid who's working at Home Mart. He's not doing anything amazing. He's trying to get security guards. So he's trying he's really far down on the rung, trying to get a little bit higher on the rung, but not much. And up here is super fancy and gazillionaires in Wall Street, and he's just trying to get it from here to here. It's a small goal, but it's a realistic one. It's a realistic one, and that's kind of what draws us into here, is that we have very realistic people with very realistic problems that are not easily solved. And this sets up a great opportunity for a certain main character, of course, because we want to see what someone will do and if somebody can solve that problem. So we're selling this on the fact that we like the main character. Again, if you guys remember my John Wick one, how did we get John to be liked by the audience? Well, John's a regular guy. He left this life behind of being an assassin, and he's got a wife who he loves, and he spent time with her. And then she died. And at that point where she dies, you get the understanding that, okay, well, there's sympathy because, gosh, that sucks. There's nothing they could do. She just passes due to an incurable illness, and this sucks, and this is horrible, and we feel bad for John. So then we sympathize with him, and then he gets a dog. And it's like, huzzah, it's the last gift from his wife. And that's what's drawing us in and getting this sympathy for John, is that he's trying to pick up the pieces. Basically, that's what it is. What we have is basically a grieving widow trying to pick up the pieces. That's what's drawing us in. Again, and then not to pick on, it feels like I'm going to be picking on the killer a lot. This is where the killer doesn't really do that. And again, I don't think Fincher was trying to tell that kind of story. He's trying to do a different story, one where the main character isn't the easily seen good guy. He's not really supposed to be a good guy, which I get. The problem is that we didn't really like him, basically. I didn't really like him. It's not that you can appreciate him for being an expert in his craft, which, he is good at what he does. And you can see that later on. He is good, especially when he goes to kill the lawyer and sneak in and pretend to be, anonymous and everything and all this. He's good. But the first 10 to 15 minutes is him being out of touch, basically. And then, of course, you find out that he's rich, he's loaded. It's not until 30 minutes in, when the girlfriend gets beat, you find the girlfriend beat up, that you then go, oh, I like this guy. Or not even I like this guy. It's, oh, I want to see him get the bad guys. So now we're on his side. Versus John Wick, it's much sooner. It happens probably about 5 to 10 minutes in. And what you've got is... it happens much, much sooner than that. And it goes into showing, of course, the dog, the wife, all this stuff. And then the dog gets killed. And then we're like, go get him, John. Just go crazy. This is absolutely absurd. So go get him. And that's why we like John. That provides the moral vindication, basically, for the rest of the movie that's going to ride on. This is the reason why the beginnings, of course, are so important. Kind of why I love focusing on them, is because when you have 10 minutes to, one, set up the characters, set the plot, set the stage, set the theme, set the growth pattern for all characters, and then set the tone and interest the audience. This is the reason why you really want to nail your intro, because it has to do all of this stuff. So Right now, Equalizer's doing it. We like Robert, Bob. He's reading books. He's trying to do this. He's doing, he's a good guy. He's just a good guy, and he's helping out in simple ways, simple, everyday ways from here. And then you have this interaction with Terry, this prostitute. She's a child, basically. I don't know if they intentionally got somebody who looks really, really young, but she just looks and feels young. You get this idea that she's had it rough, and she's got it really rough. And so what you have then is you're interested. This is the other thing. We're kind of interested in what happens with Ralphie, but we're a lot more interested in what is going to happen to Terry. And the reason what kind of helps trigger and escalate and propel this forward is you change scenery. You change scene. So we go from the diner back to the old Home Mart, back to Home Mart over here. And now what you're doing is you're kind of having a plot in the shadow of what happened with Terry. So you can kind of think of the subplots as kind of like this. Basically, they're kind of not really overlapping, but they're kind of going to here to here to here. And what we're doing is we have this scene. Let's put Ralphie up here and we'll put Terry down here, and we'll put Robert's overall plot, down here or something like that. But what you have is you have Ralphie introducing, he's a diet, he's aspirations. So you can kind of think of this as he's going forward, rising action, rising tension, because of course the question is, will he succeed? You can kind of see that he's overweight, and he really is trying to sneak some extra food into his diet. So that's the question. But right before we get to see whether or not he succeeds, we're going to jump over to Terry, and we can have this conversation of, okay, is she going to be a singer? Is she going to do something, leave this life behind? Is she going to do better in her life? We don't know. And then right as it kind of, it cuts away, and so now we're left with this lingering doubt. So what it does is it adds this propulsion. What you can do is you can use this propulsion to get you through, quote unquote, boring sections of the story, which in this case would probably be Robert at Home Mart, just being a normal guy. Nothing's happening. That's the thing. Nothing's happening. But what you're doing is you have this big question of what happens to Terry, and then bam, we're back to Home Mart. And what's Robert doing? He's helping customers out. He's, bantering with his, his coworkers. They're asking him, this is another thing this next scene at Home Mart does, is they ask him what he does. And he gives them an answer that he's a dancer. He was a backup pit for the Soul Train, the TV station or something. And they're like, what? No way. But then again, this, of course, invites the question of, okay, this is probably a lie, maybe. But we're going to figure out if it is a lie or not. But if it is a lie, why is he lying? Which, again, is building this intrigue to this authority figure, this super strong character that obviously there's more to him than just Home Mart. He's better. He could do more than that if he wanted to. So it leads into the question of intrigue. It's asking this mystery and intrigue for our character. And then, of course, this leads into the great question of, okay, why or what happens? And this makes sure then that the audience is getting drawn into the story, and they want to figure out what happens and what's going to happen next. And this is what really works. Because again, if you get the audience wanting to know what happens, then you got them. That's where you want them. Because you want them trying to figure out what happens next. So we've got this, and we got this aspect of, well, he's lying about what he's doing, and this building, okay, well, what is he really doing? And then cut back to the diner. And we're back to Terry. So now what you can use is you can use this aspect of what's going to happen with Terry and then cut away. And so the audience is still trying to figure out, and they want to go back to Terry to figure out what's going to happen to Terry. And you can use that to then basically get you through and propel the audience interest through boring parts, quote unquote, boring parts, if you want, or to ask another question. In this case, it's the movie. And then once you ask is he lying about his background, then you can get to cut back. So now we've been left with two questions. We want to figure out what happens to Terry and why he's lying, and now we're back to Terry. Okay, good. But then now we're left with this other section. So this is the reason why it kind of is fairly effective to do all these little subplots and then continually jump between them. Because what you can use, you can have a small subplot here where basically it's super interesting. So let's say it's building up super interesting, and then you cut to normal life. So this will be, if we're thinking this is a super interesting subplot and then a boring buildup, what you're doing is you're using this super interesting thing to then get through the boring buildup. And the boring buildup is you're trying to establish Robert McCall's a regular guy. He's a regular dude working at Home Mart. He has regular coworkers who are also like not, they're not amazing, super exciting, cool people. They're regular people. They're just regular people with regular problems, which again is what we all live in, the lives we're all living. But this is a story. Usually the story has to have some way to entice the audience to go care about somebody who's a little bit more than normal, or find a way to get them to care about somebody who's normal. And you can do this with a story, but you have to give them time. You have to set the scene, set the character, set the realism, and you can do all of that in this section. Again, this story does make a good job about there not really being boring sections, but then you can do this, and then you can have this one, and it builds, the super interesting thing builds on itself, and it's getting more and more interesting, and then then it cuts back to boring. And you can even have the boring sections even a lot longer than the super interesting ones. And you can use this to help propel stuff forward. So this is something that the Killer, again, I'm going to be picking on the Killer a decent amount. It didn't do. And again, I can understand what they're trying to do is they don't want to cut away because they want you to focus on the monotony and the boringness of all this. But if you do that, is the audience going to get bored? How do you make it interesting? That's what you kind of have to go from there. So what we've got here, and then what we've got, so for back towards Equalizer, what we've got is we're back at the diner. So at this point, we're back at the diner. We're kind of continuing this conversation with the book. So, it finds out that, the old man does get the book, but then he ties it to the side of his boat, and the blood from it causes the sharks to come about. But you got the old man in the sea, and he ties, and there's sharks in the boat, sharks around the boat, and he ties this fish that he's been fighting and striving against to the side of the boat. I haven't actually read the story, but there's spoiler alert. But then he ties the fish to the side of the boat, but then the blood is seeping in the water, and the sharks are there, and they come and eat the fish, basically. And so it's this kind of this, begging the question. Hemingway's kind of castorizing or bringing about this is the old man, and he's battling against his mortal enemy, and they kind of have this respect and this love and this kinship. Because at the end of the day, they have to be who they are. The old man has to be the old man. The fish has to be a fish. And they have to fight each other because that's just who they are. But then there's this kind of kinship in their battle between each other. And then that's what it's kind of going for. So they're talking about this, and they're talking about her life. And this is the nice thing that the story does is there's a lot of dual audio, what I've kind of referred to as dual audio going about here, where, you kind of have one question about life and another question. And it kind of, the focus kind of weaves in back and forth. This is something that Aaron Sorkin's really good at doing in The Newsroom and all the other ones where you have a conversation where two things are happening at once, where they're talking about the book and how people can control their lives and what it means to make decisions for yourself. And then they kind of look at Terry the prostitute and they're like, you're going to do anything different? You're going to change your life? You're going to make yourself better? You're going to get out of this life? Anything like that? And that's what it is. And then, of course, and then we switch again. So we're switching again. And we're switching faster this time. So it's kind of like smaller and smaller and smaller subplot jumps back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We would go back to the Home Depot. It's his birthday. There's that. And then it goes back to the diner and no Terry. And this is really, really good how to do that. Because at this point, there's no Terry. And he's just reading. He's just reading his book. Bam. And it's just like, that's such a good way to do it because, of course, now your question is, what happened to Terry? Especially because I think in the second section here, when we're at Terry, this one, she has a bruise on her face. And so what we're trying to figure out then is what happened. There's this building action where Terry needs to escape this life, but will she? Robert can't do it for her. She has to make that decision herself. We all know this. And so, no Terry. What happened to her? And then he goes and he's doing other stuff, going about his normal life, going about, training Ralphie, helping Ralphie out. And then he goes into the diner again, and the guy tells him that she's in the hospital. And so then he goes to the hospital. He goes to the hospital. He meets another woman of the night. This is the young woman. I don't think she's ever given a name. Another woman who's a friend of Terry's, basically. friend of Terry. And she tells him what happened, which is that sorry, I completely missed it. When they're walking home, he walks her home, I think here, and she gets in the car with a bunch of Russians. Duh, I shouldn't have missed that, because that's obviously what you're having the plot continually develop, even though it's split up over different sections. So this Terry plot here, is continually accessing, the same arc, but it's getting split up. So, the first encounter, second encounter, third, etc., fourth, from there. She gets in a van with a bunch of Russians, basically, and the guy hands it, and it's escort service, and he's like, yeah, Cole, get the escort. And he does this evil Russian thing, and he drives off. And so we know something's bad going to happen, but we don't know what to do, because you can't force somebody to save yourself. And then, of course, after getting taken by her Russian people, her pimps, essentially, we find out that she's in the hospital. So from there, we've got, the friend of Terry, and we find out that somebody beat her up. And this is interesting, because I actually read the script and then kind of the movie, and I think it doesn't include that, but she actually gets sexually assaulted as well in the movie script. I think it's kind of hinted at, but you don't know. She's just badly beaten and everything like that in the movie. I think it kind of takes a little bit of the edge off of the sexual assault aspect. But either way, it's bad. She's in bad shape. She's basically been severely beaten. We obviously know who did it. It was our Tovarich friends, the Russians. So what it then cuts to, I think it cuts to Ralphie a few other times. And then this is where we're at about 20 minutes in. So 20 minutes in, this is where we're at. No violence has happened. No action has happened. We don't even know anything really about Robert. We kind of know we do know some stuff. We know he's, he's determined, he's dedicated, he's almost like a machine. He's, talking about his wife, that she died. He reveals in his talks with Terry is that his wife broke his heart. And, there's this question, what happened? Oh, she died. He used to work and never spend time, spend time away, and she was reading books, and now he's kind of taking up the mantle of trying to read books to kind of have that connection to his wife. So you have this, he really did love his wife. And that's one thing that, is all building towards we like Robert McCall. We really like him. He's a good person. And so you have this thing. But you also think he's capable of something more. You think he's capable of something more than what he's showing off so far. And so what you have is this building tension where he wants to help people. Basically, he wants to help people, and he wants to help Terry. But Terry's kidnapped by Russian mafia. And so the only way to stop them is... we don't know how. Dun dun. If you know what Denzel Washington is and types of movie is, you kind of know where it's going. You can kind of get an idea of what it's going towards. So there you have it. And so now what we're building towards is, again, 20 minutes in, no action. You think in The Killer, we had 15 minutes before that sniper bullet went off. Again, this is even farther out, but it does, I think, I would argue, a much better job of engaging the audience. The audience cares about the main character and everything like that. And that also keeps them interested. Because again, caring about the main character is kind of just another synonym for getting them interested. Because when you care about something, you want to see what happens to them. And that's what you want in a story, is you want them to care about your characters. They need to figure out and love and want to know what's going to happen to them. For The Killer, we didn't really have that, I would argue. John Wick, we did have that. We definitely have it. That's what made that movie such a success, is because we did care about John. We cared about the dog. Don't kill the dog. So we see him, and he's got Terry, and then he shows up at the Russian restaurant, and he offers to buy Terry back. They, of course, refuse, and there's this tense buildup of 3 to 4 minutes, I think, so far, of a few pages of dialogue where they're going back and forth, where he tries to buy her freedom, because he knows that until they agree to let her go, she'll never be free. So, even if he kind of says, hey, go away, they're just not going to really listen to him. So he has to find a way to work on their terms. So he's like, money. They understand money. He's going to buy her for... In the script, it was a little bit less, but I think I'm glad they increased it a little bit more. It was $9,800 in the script, or in the movie. They wanted to buy her. The Russians make fun of him, and this is just building up this moral indignation, basically, and a moral indignation, so that way, when I think I spelled that right. When something bad happens to these Russians, nobody cares. We don't care. We don't mind that the Russians get beat up because they're bad guys. And what you're doing is this, they're mocking him, they're making fun of him. They're just really vicious bad guys. And then, of course, he does his classic thing. He does his thing with the clock, and he says, I don't know, 45 seconds or something. Or I think it's 15 seconds. Yeah, 15 seconds. 15 seconds. And he pushes his watch. And then he sees the whole world, and you get an idea of this view of Robert's vision. And you can see he's collecting all these details and all this stuff happening. And you've had this whole time of 20 minutes of building tension of what is Robert, what is he, and what can he do. And you have this building tension, and then he's 15 seconds. And he beats the crap out of him. He absolutely beats the crap out of him and kills all of them. And then, of course, eventually the main bad guy, Slavy the Russian pimp. He ends up shooting him, and then he's sitting there on the floor, and he has this great interaction with him where he's just like, here's something I want you to know. That girl that you beat, she's going to live. And you're going to die here on this floor, and no one's going to care about you. And your life is going to end all over $9,800. Bam. And it's just like such a good drop the beat moment. So right now at this point, we're about 30 minutes at this point, and we are hooked. We want to see what happens. And this is what you want to do and have and build up towards for your stories is what you've got. You've got introducing these characters slowly, these subplots, because this will help flesh your character out. You tell it from you talk about other people, so you don't reveal too much personally about your main character. So they remain this mysterious, warrior soldier, basically, and they can have all this aura of apparatus around them that you don't know what they're capable of or what they're going to do. And you can build this all up. You can have this. And that's how you do, but you need to have plot, you need to have something to talk about. So you have these subplots and these sub-characters, and then you, of course, jumping in between them, and you have this aspect for it. And this is something that the story just does really well. It builds it up, makes us like Mr. McCall. We really respect him. We see his authority. We want to see Terry. We care about Terry. We want Terry to make better life decisions. And when you realize she can't and she needs help, Robert's there, and he takes out the Russians. And it's such a badass, cool moment. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I kind of just wanted to talk about the intro portion and kind of highlight all this and show what you can do with this type of story and how it can happen. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next one.